Thanks a lot for stopping by this session. I think there's 6 sessions running at exactly the same time, so I feel privileged that you've chosen this one to come along to. So just for those who perhaps aren't familiar with what digital poverty actually is, I'm from the Digital Poverty Alliance. It does what it says on the tin. We're looking to tackle an issue that means basically 19 million people in the UK, over 16, can't access any type of online service that they might need to, when, where, and how they want to be able to do that. So that might be because they don't have access to a device. It might be that they don't have access to the right kind of device. So if you're trying to apply for a job and all you've got is a smartphone, that's probably not ideal. If you don't have access to connectivity, whether that is broadband or data, and we're going to get into the connectivity bit in quite a bit of detail. And then, of course, we have the skills and confidence that goes with being able to use devices, but also maintaining resilience. So I'm sure we will all be familiar with the fact that things change at quite a high speed. If you're not digitally confident and you're following some instructions and then everything changes, that can push you into digital poverty too. So, as I said, there's 19 million people in the country who are experiencing this. That's 1 in 7 people within the UK. You're up to 3 times more likely to be in digital poverty if you're unemployed. You're up to 22% more likely to be in digital poverty if you're a woman. And for 2 to 4 million people in the country, this is solely down to affordability. So it's not a skills gap, it's not an unwillingness, it's not that people don't want to get online, it's not that people aren't engaged. They just can't afford it. So this is what takes us on to open roaming, open connectivity, actually really being able to find some new and different solutions. Traditional solutions to the connectivity gap have really focused on one-to-one connections. So how do we fund broadband to get from the exchange to somebody's house?
Am I okay to put this on the background?
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. What this gives us is a new opportunity to think about how we can create one-to-many connections. So instead of us thinking constantly, who's going to pay the 20 quid a month, we can just create this open capacity that means anyone, in theory, could be able to be in an area and jump online. It might not be the fastest possible speed, but actually it could really solve an issue for people. So this is where we get on to open roaming. Now, I was going to say there's not that many of us, but I was going to say hands up if you have heard of the term open roaming, if you're familiar with what that means. We've only got 1. Okay. Good. Well, you've come to the right place then. This is excellent. I did think there were going to be people going, yeah, we already know all this. I was also going to say there's growing familiarity with this, but that has proved me wrong. So open roaming is all about how there can be a formal way of organisations, whether they are government buildings, whether they are local retailers, whether they're hotels, whether they're schools, whether they're leisure centres, whether it's in the lampposts, whether they're, local authority provision, of being able to open up all of that disused internet that is sitting there most of the time. If you think about our offices, capacity is now a lot lower. People are not necessarily going into the office and using all of that broadband that has been plugged in to go into that space. If we think about a football club, it might be absolutely rammed on a Saturday afternoon, maybe even a midweek evening, but the rest of the time you've got all of that internet bandwidth sitting there completely unharnessed. Now, this was originally seen really as being more of an opportunity to drive tourism in areas. So, say, particularly in London, where we happen to be today, you could get off the plane at Heathrow. You could instantly be jumping onto a London-wide open roaming network, moving through the tube, wandering around the city, constantly connected because you've signed up at that first point when you were standing around Heathrow Airport waiting to get your bags back. Then it was seen as an opportunity to drive business, so particularly in areas whether it's like Tokyo or Canary Wharf, really helpful to have that connectivity wherever you are. Growingly though, and particularly this is something that we are advocating for at the DPA, this is an opportunity for digital inclusion. So if we consider Westminster as a really central part of London that we're probably all going to be familiar with, yes, it has some of the most wealthy and affluent parts of that borough, but it also has, absolutely at the other end, some of the most deprived wards in the country, some of the most deprived communities. So where there is an opportunity to create something that businesses and organisations can feed into, you can then be, as I said, taking that unused internet, and instead of it being your tourists and your business people, actually it is local people being able to dial into that provision that exists within that local area. So how can this be done in an organised way that isn't just people like the DPA saying, great, we'll take the password off your Wi-Fi and that'll be fantastic, everyone can just log in and log into your network. So the World Broadband Alliance, WBA, who I'm sure some of you will be familiar with, has created open roaming as a formal protocol with what they've called an ecosystem policy authority that ensures that there is the safety and security around this protocol that is freely available, it is open to all, and you can find out more on the World Broadband Alliance website, or come and speak to me or Jennifer, and WBA would love to hear from anyone, so we'd be really happy to put anyone interested in touch with them. You have some key actors within this, so you have network providers, and those are the people who are opening up that connectivity. So it might be spare capacity, as I say, in an office or a hotel. It might be local public services. Any size of organisation can get involved in this as long as they've got the physical premises with the infrastructure that goes with that. There's then identity providers, and those are the people who are providing the option for you and me to be able to sign up for an account and then link that into that open roaming network that's being created in a locality or indeed across multiple sites. And then, of course, you've got the end users, and that is, from our perspective, really going to be those people who are digitally disconnected, but it's something that they can put onto their phone. They get it one time, they sign up one time, they enter their password, and as long as they've got their Wi-Fi switched on, they will be able to access the internet whenever they're in range of that open roaming network. This then means not only do they have that opportunity when they're in that particular place, but if it's a larger area being covered, say the entirety of London, or the entirety of Tokyo, or the entirety of any other place on Earth, once they're in, and they can keep picking that up. It's not that, oh, I've moved to a different part of the city now, I've got to sign up again. So what this means for digital poverty is that from a policy perspective, there has been a very tired cycle that I think a lot of people who are interested in digital inclusion have got a bit bored with, to be quite honest, where we go round, who should pay for this? Should the individual pay for this? Should a telephone company pay for this, like BT, Virgin Media, O2, etc.? Should the government pay for this? Should it be paid for through benefits and taxes? Is that how we should deal with this? And we have gone round and round this debate for well over 20 years in terms of actually thinking about how do we solve data poverty, how do we solve the connectivity element, which has that monthly cost attached to it. It's not like a laptop where you give somebody something once and they're sorted for a few years. Connectivity is an unending problem in terms of how you pay for it. This gives a unique solution for actually being able to create something that has minimal outlay, whether it's private sector, whether it's public sector, whether it's even third sector, absolutely minimal outlay, and ensures that people have a baseline of being able to get online, whether that's for their kids' education. 90% of kids are expected to do something online at least once a week from home and often end up in detention when they fail to be able to do that. Again, 90% again of jobs are only ever advertised online. So if you can't get online, you can't find a job, you can't write your CV, you can't send it off to anyone. Healthcare, you'll probably be well aware that the government are seeking to move far more health provision to an online-based NHS platform. that is only going to mean that if people are in data poverty, they can't access that as well, and much more, whether it's benefits, whether it's other essential services, whether it's fun and entertainment even. So this is a great way of engaging more people to be able to get online in a way that isn't going to cost them money. And it is absolutely fundamental for breaking that poverty trap. If you can't find the support that you need, you can't grow your own aspiration, you can't reach your ambitions. And if you can't get online, you can't access that support in most communities across the UK. So what we are really looking to do at the DPA is advocate for the fact that this exists. And we've done some awareness raising today, because none of you put your hands up apart from Phoebe, so this is good news in itself. Get people to actually think about, is this something that you could implement in the organisation maybe that you are representing? Do you have an office with a fixed premises? Do you have, you know, that infrastructure coming into your building that actually you could open up? Do you have the will within your organisation to think about, is open roaming something that actually you could implement? It's safe, it's secure, it doesn't need vast amounts of new equipment, it is an open protocol that WBA have made available and continue to update on, work on. And if it is, do you want to help people in your community with no cost to you actually be able to get online? Hopefully you're going to be thinking, well, it's not really a good reason not to. So yes, we should. That was what we wanted to come and talk about. It's part of our national delivery plan, which aims to raise awareness and find real solutions for some very difficult problems around digital exclusion. If you've got any questions, I'd love to take those now. Go for it. I think it's on its way in a minute.
Representing two hats really. In my professional job, we work with libraries, and I'm interested to understand how this is being pushed out through public libraries. I always get a little bit dismayed, and no disrespect to your presentation, which was really interesting, that the focus often seems to be urban centres, and it seems to be around the southeast London, you mentioned a lot of times, and didn't mention Manchester. Well, once actually you did a stadium, I think. But we get neglected in the north, we get neglected in the countryside. Libraries are everywhere. Is this being pushed out through libraries?
So, fantastic questions, and actually I'm glad you've given me an opportunity to speak about something I couldn't quite wedge in, so I'll do it anyway. Libraries, absolutely. So libraries are controlled by the local authorities. Where we've seen the most take-up of this and the most interest and the most piloting has been in the urban centres. The one that's most recently gone live is Westminster, so we've been talking about that a lot. Manchester, so Greater Manchester Combined Authority are also looking at this, and also very similarly to open roaming, looking at how mesh networks can be used. So there is an example in Rochdale where a local authority has used its housing stock to be able to create a mesh network providing internet for, I think it's 26p a month to every household within that housing estate. What we tend to see with open roaming is, unfortunately, it does work best in more urban locations where you've got more opportunities to be able to create quite a big network, whereas if you think about more rural areas, having enough organisations that are willing to be interested to be able to provide more than just sort of immediately outside that library, that's quite challenging because you're not reaching into homes. Certainly what we don't want to be suggesting is that kids go and sit on the steps of wherever after school to be able to get online. You are absolutely 100% right. There is a huge amount of digital poverty in inner city areas. It follows poverty. There is also a huge level of digital poverty in rural, coastal and post-industrial areas of the UK. In terms of a lot of the delivery work that we do, so part of what we do is advocacy, the other half is getting kit and connectivity and skills and support into the hands of families. And we actually run the vast majority of our projects outside city and larger towns because there tends to be a little bit more support in those areas, whereas in countryside areas, isolated communities, actually that support isn't there. We are really interested, there's a lot of innovators here, so we are really interested in how open technology could be used better to support those much more isolated communities as well.
So the other hat, sorry, has anyone else got a question? Because the other hat is community centres, so I also represent community centres. There also.
Excellent, yes. If we can join this up and have lots of community centres doing this as well, that'd be great.
Hello, my name's Maureen Childs. I've been a British Computer Society member for about 50 years. I'm representing older people. Now, they were beginning to take an interest, especially using their phones to use the internet. But unfortunately, the rate of technology has moved on so quickly, their phones are being bombarded with what I call rubbish, notifications and all sorts of pop-ups and goodness knows what. They've just find their phones almost impossible to use anymore. £26 is still a lot of money for people on a state pension to find a month. I mean, that's a couple of meals for an older person. Is there any provision for free access for older people? I have a local community centre. I've been for years trying to get services there for older people in a sort of community setting, so that they can pop in, have a chat, as well as discuss how they're using the internet. But it's been absolutely impossible in the most wealthy city, one of the most wealthy cities in the world, can you believe it? So I'd like your comments on that.
Yeah, definitely.
And of course, it's a chicken and egg thing. If you haven't got the money for a device, you still can't access the internet, even open roaming.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is where, so just to tackle one thing straight off, the 26 I referred to, that's pence, not pounds. Bit of a difference. I think the microphone is a bit echoey. Pence, I feel like actually is probably doable actually, but for some people on the most in the most severe forms of poverty, anything can indeed be too much. One of the reasons we are so keen on open roaming is because that is free. That is free to the end user. If we think about how connectivity challenges are mainly being dealt with now, there's a lot of signposting people to social tariffs. That might easily be £12–15 a month. That, exactly as you say, Maureen, that's at least a meal, if not several meals. Or people are being pushed towards data packages, which can seem quite cheap, but then you run out of data halfway through the month. You're either paying a lot. If you've ever run out of data halfway through the month, you will know that is a very pricey thing to do. Or you realise that you can't afford to pay for that extra data, and you therefore find yourself offline for the rest of the month. Absolutely agree that it is very much chicken and egg. One of the things I would say is, as an organisation, we receive donations of old technology, mainly from businesses, sometimes from people, from other types of organisation, that we can then get refreshed, we can relicense, we can get the machine cleaned up, all incredibly secure, and get those devices back out to people. Can we do that for all 19 million people in digital poverty? No. But every person we help is a person who now has a device. Connectivity, we don't have that option. There is no scheme across the entirety of the UK that is consistently able to give out access to broadband because it is so expensive to run. That is why we think open roaming is excellent. Just in terms of the phone point, I agree. I'm sick of the number of notifications coming in on my phone, to be quite honest. Every time you install an app, suddenly it's got all of this extra stuff coming in. And actually a piece of work that we are looking at the moment across lots of different ages, but with the focus on older people, is actually what do older people want and need? Do they want a smartphone? Do they want a tablet? Do they actually want a keyboarded device where they can see what it is they're clicking? And actually to be able to understand what device is right for the right kind of services that somebody is trying to access. And you can make some generalizations about the kind of services people might need to access based on health and other demographics. If they're a parent, for example, they might need to be accessing school information. So we are looking at it very seriously. I've had the 5-minute board a couple of minutes ago, but any other questions that anyone wanted to pick up on? It's a stunned silence. Excellent. All right, well, I hope that you did find that interesting. If you want to find out more about the Digital Poverty Alliance, you can visit digitalpovertyalliance.org. If you want to come by, we've got a stand over in the exhibition area. We've got a big colourful wheel on there, so you can't possibly miss us. And if you want to find out more about open roaming, I really do recommend checking out the World Broadband Alliance to find out more about how that could work for you, and we're very happy to make introductions. So thanks very much.